Congresswoman Deborah Ross's Clean Energy Incentives webinar. We have this morning featuring the Department of Energy and some experts from that area, and I know you're going to enjoy their remarks. My name is Kimberly, and I'm the Congresswoman's Director of Civic Engagement. I will be your host for today's webinar, and I want to begin by thanking each and every one of you and hope that you find this webinar informative and useful. In just a moment, the staff from the Department of Energy will introduce themselves, but first, I want to explain the format for today's webinar. After introductions, the Department of Energy staff will give us an overview of the available clean energy incentives, the application process, and how these incentives can benefit our community. Then we will have a live question and answer session, and you will have the opportunity to speak to them directly. If at any point during the Q&A, you would like to ask a question, please press raise hand on your Zoom screen, and I will call on you to unmute yourself and ask your question. We might not get to every single question this morning, but we will post the Department of Energy staff's contact information in the chat box, and you will have the ability to reach out to them with your outstanding questions at your convenience. I would also like to mention that we are recording this webinar to post on our YouTube. We can send you the link in the coming days to refer back to it. And if you know someone else in the community who might find this useful, please send it along to them. Again, thank you for joining us today. And now we have joining us this morning with the Department of Energy's Office of Congressional and Intergovernmental Affairs, we have Torrin Collins, the Regional Intergovernmental and External Affairs Specialist for Appalachia. We also have Janie Thompson, Deputy Assistant Secretary for House Affairs, and Yusef Neskat, Legislative Affairs Coordinator. I'm now turning it over to the Department of Energy staff.
Thank you, Kimberly, for that introduction. Really excited to be here with everyone this morning. Thank you for making the time. Thank you for the invitation. And I know Torrin, Janie, and I are very excited to get this conversation going and really dive deeper into some of the opportunities that are coming out of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, also known as BILL, or the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act, what we call IRA here at the department as well. And so is it all right if I go ahead and share my screen? Yeah, okay. All right, can everyone see that? Okay, perfect. So let's first get into a little bit of an agenda today. So as Kimberly mentioned, I am Legislative Affairs Coordinator for the Office of the Undersecretary for Infrastructure at the department. And so the Office of the Undersecretary is really focused on deploying some of these new investments that were included in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. So I'll give a little bit of an organizational overview so you all can see how we're sort of envisioning the deployment of these resources. And then I'll kick it over to Torrin, where she'll cover some examples of BILL and IRA programs, how to go about accessing them, and some of the benefits that can stem from those. After that, we'll open it up for Q&A and some discussion. So looking forward to that. First, a mission of the department and the Office of the Undersecretary in deploying these funds sort of spans the whole spectrum of the energy sector. And so that ranges from lowering energy bills and household energy costs for consumers and families across the country, along with sort of a newer mission and focus area for the department, which is creating good jobs, boosting clean energy supply chains here in the United States. And so that is reshoring a lot of the technology that we had seen leave our country over the past several decades, and ensuring that we can get those jobs back here at a good paying rate and create domestic supply chains so we don't see some of the supply shortages that we saw as part of the COVID-19 pandemic and other sort of demand side issues that we've encountered over the past several years. And then that third bucket, advancing world-class next generation clean energy tech, that's been, a mission of the department since its really creation in the 70s. The R&D, the demonstration projects, and then we're scaling that up into large-scale demonstration and deployment as a function of the bill in the IRA. And then overall, sort of tying it all together, ensuring reliability, resilience, and efficiency. And so this ranges from activities like making power systems more resilient to adverse weather events and other threats, including cyber threats, so that we can avoid situations like some of the blackouts and such that we've seen throughout some of our states in more recent times. And so diving into the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act a little bit, as you see here, I won't go through all of these bubbles, but that middle bubble, over 90 billion in grants and rebates. And so this splits out to about 62.5 billion for the Department of Energy investments in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and then an additional 35 billion that was allocated to the department for the Inflation Reduction Act. And then you'll see there also an additional 250 billion in loan guarantees through our loan programs office. And so these are catalyzing commercial deployment of some of these clean energy technologies that may otherwise be, a little bit higher risk to finance in the commercial lending sector. We provide lower interest and greater technical expertise in those sorts of programs. And so a couple of highlights here that you all may have heard of stemming from these two massive energy bills. The Hydrogen Hubs program, carbon management, so carbon capture, utilization, and storage is a big focus here. Of course, building out our nation's EV infrastructure, and I know Torrin will cover that a little bit more in depth, but the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law stood up the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation. So we have a role in deploying a network of chargers across our country, as well as the state, local, and tribal partnerships. And so there are a lot of programs that are geared toward state and municipal governments so that they can get an allocation from DOE and then stand up a program on their own for those constituents. And so this is sort of an organizational structure of the Office of the Undersecretary. And I won't go through all of these programs either, but I just wanted to sort of demonstrate how we're envisioning splitting out some of these bill and IRA programs. And so a couple of highlights here, you'll see that the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations has a long list of tasks and programs that they're working through. This is a major focus area for the Office of the Undersecretary, and I think for DOE sort of writ large. This demonstrates our desire to sort of get into the demonstration phase of things. As I mentioned earlier, DOE's mission for so long had been a lot of research and development, sort of cutting edge research in the energy sector. But now with these, landmark, unprecedented investments, we're looking at how we can start commercializing these research and development projects and really getting these projects off the ground. I mentioned LPO, and then I think another highlight here that I want to mention is the Office of State and Community Energy Programs. And so the Office of State and Community Energy Programs, also known as SCEP, handles some of our DOE legacy programs that existed before the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, but received a new investment under them, like the Weatherization Assistance Program, the State Energy Program, and Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grants, which was actually last funded through the Recovery Act in 2009, that got some additional funding by Congress through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. A couple of new programs that are really exciting that the SCEP team is working on sort of in the design phase right now. Whole home and electrification rebates. You all may have heard of these. These are envisioned by Congress to be point of sale rebates. And so, you go to a place like Lowe's or Home Depot to buy an energy efficient appliance, and you automatically receive a rebate at the point of sale, basically a discount on an energy efficient electric home appliance while during the purchase process. And so, like I said, this is still in the design phase. We're hoping to see some of these initial tranches of money roll out to states so that they can design their program and stand it up late this year, early next year. But yeah, I encourage everyone to keep an eye out for that program. I think it's really, really exciting. Taking a step back, sort of more into the broader implementation of how the department and the administration is looking at deploying a lot of these investments. We are deploying the administration's Justice 40 initiative, and this is ensuring that at least 40% of the benefits go to disadvantaged communities. And so these are, former coal communities, communities that are, historically impoverished and, meet a certain poverty threshold, environmental justice concerns. So communities that have had, energy issues in the past, pollution issues in the past, air quality considerations go into this. And so that also goes into some of our diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility work, where we're looking at how applicants partner with each other and with the community to ensure that these jobs are lasting and that projects can not only get off the ground, but maintain a stable footing in the community, after DOE takes a step back and these projects can start running on their own. I touched on the good jobs piece, and then I think reinforcing that we have this new sort of idea that we're deploying within the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act application process that's called a community benefits plan. And so in a community benefits plan, an applicant will demonstrate how they are having these conversations within the community, what stakeholders they're engaging, and demonstrating how they can get buy-in. And we're doing this not only because we think that communities should have buy-in when deploying a major piece of infrastructure in a town or a city, but also because we see it as good risk management. And so if we can ensure that our investments have good local buy-in, I think it's more likely that project will stick in the community, will be successful, will be more efficient, and something that we can build on in the future. And so getting into the grant process here, I think if you access a lot of DOE resources and websites, which we'll share links to at the end of this presentation, you'll see a lot of these sorts of acronyms. And it's sometimes confusing as to what step goes where and how to really look at the timeline here. And so basically what this flow chart is showing, we go from a request for information, which I'll get into all of these in the next slide, request for information, then to a notice of intent, then to a funding opportunity announcement, and then we'll go to selections for negotiations, and then we'll go into the negotiation phase, and then we'll go to the award. And so just a reminder here, applications are reviewed by career civil servants via a merit-based review process for all of our competitive grants. And then DOE on the front end can give information on how to apply, details on programs, eligibility, all that stuff. We're more than happy to have those conversations and connect you with experts in a given program office. But once an application is submitted, we can't always give, really detailed insights into sort of that process, the decision-making process. And DOE can also not help you fill out your application, but we can provide technical assistance into what sort of information needs to go into an application. And so these are for competitive funding opportunities. And so this is, for example, a grant administered by DOE, this would be the process. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the request for information stage is really an information gathering sort of exercise for the department to inform program design. And so these are posted on a public website, comments are public, and it's an opportunity for stakeholders to give their perspective and expertise into how they think or how you think a program should be designed. If there are certain caveats or what have you that should be included to ensure that your organization could be eligible because you think that your organization could have a really good impact in the community under such a program, this is the opportunity for you to sort of weigh in with the department and have a say in the program design phase. After the request for information in the program design phase, we move to a notice of intent. The notice of intent is, it's the longer version of this is a notice of intent of funding opportunity. And so this is basically the department saying, hey, here's a heads up that applications for this program are about to open. We've pretty much concluded the design phase, and we want to give stakeholders and organizations across the spectrum an opportunity for them to gather their materials, start discussing mechanics of how they're actually going to fill out the application, who's going to do what, that sort of thing. And so this is sort of a courtesy announcement that the department gives with some additional program details and eligibility details enclosed. And then we'll move to the funding opportunity announcement, which is essentially the application phase for a given program. And so these, sometimes they have 2 phases in which a stakeholder is asked to submit a concept paper and then a full application. Sometimes these programs just go straight from, funding opportunity announcement opening to an application deadline. Depends on the program, but all of that information is contained in the funding opportunity announcement of what you'll need, who's eligible, all of the relevant deadlines. And then if any sort of questions or anything else comes about, feel free to reach out to us. You'll see this arrow at the bottom. Throughout this program design and application phase, the department holds roundtables and webinars, both out in the field as well as online, to really get into program details, not only solicit information and feedback from the public, but also to give information on how to apply, what we're looking for, how you can make your application most successful. And so again, we have some resources at the end here where you can sign up for various mailing lists via program offices if there are certain ones that are of interest to you, and they'll keep you posted on anything that's coming down the pike in that sort of realm. One last thing on the process side before I kick it over to Torrend. So that was for the competitive grants. For formula funding opportunities, these are programs in which DOE takes a pot of money and doles it out to states based on a certain formula. It's population, poverty rate, other factors go into it as well. But DOE doles out this money to states, and then states stand up programs sort of at the direction of Congress under the sort of broader umbrella of these programs with guardrails and such. And so this process, as you'll see, is a little different. First, we have the formula allocations where the Department of Energy determines how much money each state or municipality will get. And so generally it states larger municipalities and cities will receive formula funding under certain programs as well. And tribes are also eligible for formula funding under several DOE programs. After those allocations are determined, we'll get into the administrative and legal requirements document phase, the ALRD. This is basically, as you see here, it serves as DOE's solicitation of grant applications. And so this is where states basically fill out an application saying, hey, we acknowledge that, or say cities and tribes, fill out an application acknowledging, hey, we see that we're eligible for this amount of funding. We intend to stand up this sort of program. And so it's conveying to DOE that we're interested, we're ready for the funds whenever you all are ready. And so after that, states, cities, and tribes can fill out the actual formula application. And then these are passed on to, so after the states receive the money, states, cities, and tribes receive the money, they stand up their own programs. And so local sort of stakeholders and constituents can apply through their states under a given program for funding. And again, that green arrow at the bottom, we have various stakeholder engagement events and webinars throughout the formula funding process as well. And so with that, I will kick it over to Torin to get into some examples and key programs stemming out of the bill and IRA.
Great. Thanks so much, Yusuf. And again, thank you all for your time this morning. Really appreciate the opportunity to engage with stakeholders in North Carolina. And as Kimberly shared, I am the regional specialist in Appalachia. So North Carolina is under my umbrella. So please feel free to contact me at your convenience. I'm happy to share more information and connect you with some of our program offices if you have more questions about funding opportunities after this webinar. And so as Yusuf so greatly laid out, there's a lot of work that DOE is doing through these monumental investments through IIJA, IRA. And so we just wanted to touch on a few of the funding opportunities that we found are coming up in conversations and can give you an idea of what the funding allocation is and kind of what the examples of that funding projects for that funding can look like. So really supporting the domestic manufacturing, which is a big initiative on behalf of the president and the entire administration. So we wanted to highlight a couple of opportunities that I've seen within my region. One is the battery and critical material supply chain. It's a program that funds battery supply chain manufacturing, including refining, component assembly, and recycling. So when we're talking about those battery and critical materials, we're talking about those that are helping build out our EVs. And I know a lot in Appalachia, that's been a big conversation piece. So this is $3 billion remaining in program funding. And what we're talking about is an example of like new build of battery component manufacturing or expansion of existing manufacturing capabilities. So if you're thinking about industries that are within your cities or within North Carolina that could benefit from this opportunity, this is one you may want to flag and direct them to. And then also domestic conversion grants. This program is going to fund the retooling and conversion of existing businesses from the internal combustion engine ICE supply chain. And so an example is a current automobile part manufacturer can help get a grant to help retool their facility to begin producing components for EVs. So it's looking not only at building new builds of battery component manufacturing, but also trying to provide those industry folks that are already manufacturing the assistance they need to retool their facility. So it really streamlines and help us to advance what we're trying to do around EVs and increasing adoption across the country. Next slide, please, Yusuf. And we're also going to stick with the supporting domestic manufacturing, the advanced energy manufacturing and recycling opportunities, and the advanced energy project investment credits. And I won't read the allocations here, but what we've tried to do is just provide a snapshot of the funding amount and the status. One of the things that I've heard in my role, because I am more able to intimately engage with folks from large cities in the state and small cities, it's a timeline, and understanding that capacity and bandwidth are one of the top pieces of feedback that I get in this position that I do share with our leadership. So having having the opportunity to know how you can structure and when you should get ready to apply to these funding opportunity awards and what is needed is critical. So just wanted to highlight those two things on this slide. And also for a couple of examples, our advanced energy manufacturing and recycling is going to really look at like small manufacturers receiving a grant to retool to begin manufacturing mounting equipment for solar panels. So I've heard a lot of conversations with some of my cities about investments in solar, whether it's looking at storage or it's looking at how to retrofit their government buildings or their schools. And having this opportunity for industry folks is going to allow them to play an integral part in adoption and actually getting the resources to the entities that want them and want to, you know, advance solar in their communities. And next slide, please. And so shifting a bit, we want to focus on right now is decarbonizing and growing American industry. So we're thinking about all the different ways in which the funding opportunities are functioning to really meet the president's goal and agenda. Two of these opportunities we wanted to highlight were the Industrial Emissions Program and the Industrial Assessment Centers. And I'll stick with just really explaining the IAC's Industrial Assessment Centers, which have been really, really integral in really decarbonizing and growing the American industry. And so essentially this funding is to create IACs at community colleges and trade schools to give students the hands-on experience to improving the industrial processes and providing grants to manufacturers to implement those improvements. So you think about your community colleges within North Carolina that are really looking to increase the channels of participation from students into creating these clean energy items that we need to advance, like solar and EVs. And we really have to have a foundation of a workforce that can actually do the work and can get the job done. And so these entities that are eligible are colleges, universities, community colleges, trade schools, and union training programs. We really want to create opportunities for students that are good union paying jobs so that they can advance the agenda. And the IACs are a really great example of that. And let's say within North Carolina, there's an community college that wants to create an IAC to build a clean energy job training program and help local manufacturers increase the energy efficiency of their operations. So it's really creating that channel so that you can have the workforce you need within your state to support the manufacturers that are building the technologies that are needed to advance the efficiencies at your buildings or at schools or whatnot. So it's a really great opportunity that we're hoping folks will be able to take advantage of. And you can see here that concept papers are due by May 5th, which is right around the corner. So if you have any institutions that may be interested, please have them reach out to us so that we can get them in the right direction so they can be applying for that funding opportunity. Next slide, Yusuf. Thank you. So also along the lines of just really building out industry, building out the workforce, we really want to continue to invest in communities and energy improvements in rural and remote areas, and the clean energy demonstrations on former mine lands have really been essential in my region. I'm in Appalachia and our team is broken up across the country, but really in Appalachia, I've heard, you know, how do we convert our former mine lands? What can we use this area for? And there are a lot of rural communities who are trying to understand, given the bandwidth and given the challenges, you know, what kind of improvements can be made. And so in the energy improvements in rural or remote areas, there's grant opportunities for projects that increase energy efficiency or improve the overall cost effectiveness of energy generation, transmission, and distribution lines. And so let's say a rural community wants to deploy a solar and storage microgrid to reduce energy prices and increase resiliency. This funding opportunity would help them to reach that goal. And with the clean energy demonstrations on former mine lands, let's say a clean energy developer wants to utilize former mine land to build a solar project to deliver clean power while maximizing employment opportunities in the area. So this funding opportunity again ties in with the former. If you have a workforce that's focused on advancing clean energy technologies and you come in with a developer who wants to refurbish a mine land by putting in solar installation, those things go hand in hand and really not only help the community to build out the infrastructure it needs to be more energy efficient and also produce job opportunities for its residents, but it also advances clean energy. And so you can see that these, at least for the clean energy demonstrations on former mine land, the concept papers are due by May 11th, and full applications are due August 31st. And I highly advise if you do have questions about these funding opportunities, there's usually a FAQ accompanying those that are really helpful because there have been, as to Yusuf's point earlier, a lot of preliminary dialogue and a lot of feedback we received from stakeholders about the funding, how it should be structured. And that's a good way for you to get a better understanding before you submit your proposal. Next slide.
And Torin, one quick point here that I also want to note, we should have included this in the presentation, but in case folks are wondering, like, why are you showing us energy improvements in rural remote areas, an opportunity that's already closed or the concept paper deadlines passed? I want to be clear that for a lot of these programs, especially this one is $1 billion. This is a first round of $300 million. And so a lot of these programs will be discrete sort of tranches of money in consecutive funding rounds that will be announced pretty space kind of far out from each other. But yeah, just wanted to note that folks will have another shot at a lot of these programs in which deadlines have seemingly passed.
Yeah, thank you for that, Yusuf. And also, I think one of the good things about that is that you get to see what some of the funding went to for projects, and it can give you a sense. I mean, of course, there's no guarantee. We don't have our eyes into the review process, as Yusuf stated, but it gives you a really good sense of how are your peers thinking about opportunities for investment, and if there's some projects lined up that would be a really great fit, you could be prepared to submit your application for the next round. So thank you, Yusuf, for highlighting that. And now we're just going to transition to ensuring the resiliency and reliability of our grid. That has been a continuous conversation, I know, throughout my region and with my colleagues on the intergovernmental team and colleagues on this line as well. And so this is just a grant to enhance grid flexibility and improve the resilience of the power system against extreme weather. And if anyone has been tracking the news, we've had everything from, Texas experiencing ice storms at one point, lots of flooding, especially in the Appalachian region. So it's critical that we have we're investing funds to really ensure that we have a stable, resilient grid. So one of the examples for this type of funding would be if a grid operator wants to do underground electrical equipment and weatherized technologies to make them less susceptible to adverse events and physical harm. So if you know that there is an operator of sorts that would be interested in taking advantage of this opportunity, please do share this with them. As Yusuf stated, the first $3.8 billion was announced in 2022. Applications closed late 2022, early 2023, and there will be a second round of funding anticipated for fiscal year 2024. So if you're looking at these dates sometimes and thinking we're behind the 8 ball, you are not. As he stated, there will be many opportunities with some of these funding announcements or funding awards to participate in a second and possibly third round. Next slide. And I won't spend a ton of time here. I know that Yusuf mentioned this when he kind of gave an overview and was talking about one of our program offices, but lowering costs and improving home efficiency for consumers is essential. So we've got the home efficiency rebates and the home electrification and appliance rebates. And in a couple of slides, I'll show you a resource that would be really helpful for keeping track of some of those rebate opportunities. But these programs are currently in design stage. And as he said earlier, the first tranche are expected late 2023, early 2024. And just to provide a couple of examples for the home efficiency rebates, if you're looking at single family or multifamily households, they can be provided discounts or rebates for home efficiency upgrades that save at least 20% of the home's energy use. So I came into DOE wide-eyed, bushy-tailed, not knowing extremely a lot about everything that we covered. And this is essential, right? This is an opportunity that's going to allow our communities from those, especially those who are maybe in rural communities, take advantage of energy efficient appliances and technologies that can really help overall decrease what they're paying out of pocket. And I know for a lot of you all on the line, that's something you probably hear on a daily, how can I cut my cost? And this opportunity and these rebates are going to be essential to helping folks move forward with that. Next slide. And also just want to share some information about transportation and EV infrastructure. In my role, I've heard a lot as with solar and energy efficiency. How can some of the cities and states really take advantage of this investment through funding to really beef up transportation and EV infrastructure throughout their cities, throughout the states. And so DOE and the Department of Transportation have a joint office of energy and transportation, which is responsible for deploying $7.5 billion from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the investment IIJA, sorry. And it's going to play a key role in building out the national framework for a network from EV charging stations. So I really advise folks to visit this website. There are a couple of funding opportunities that are out now, and there's a plethora of information to really help your cities and your state think about how can we build this infrastructure so that there can be adoption for all communities. You know, I think there's sometimes a misnomer with folks about EVs, but there's a lot of information here and there's a lot of education that you can provide your residents. And you can also utilize when you're thinking about building out your plans and infrastructure for your cities. Next slide. And we really wanted to highlight this fantastic website that was launched. I think it's been a week, maybe a week and a half. And this is the Energy Savings Hub I referenced a little earlier. This is consumer facing. It's a comprehensive tool. It's going to show consumers that how they can save money on energy efficiency appliances and equipment through tax credits and other incentives. So if you're going to take a few things away from this presentation about resources for your community, please do take a look at this website. It has been a labor of love, and it is a fantastic resource that I share with folks now every day, because it really provides you an overview of how folks can move forward. And I think with the funding opportunities and investments we have, coupled with this site to help consumers navigate the space and to really pick out the best products for them and what that's going to mean as far as rebates or tax incentives, it's going to be critical, and it's going to be super helpful to advancing our clean energy initiatives. Next slide. And so just wanted to highlight as well technical assistance and engagement. As Yusuf mentioned, the new State Community and Energy Programs SCEP office is incredible. They have a state and local solution center. It's a resource hub for state and local governments, as well as K-12 school districts. They've had a number of webinars that they've hosted that live with on the website. Soliciting stakeholder feedback and input and providing information to help apply for and deploy DOE programs effectively and efficiently. So I highly recommend that you take advantage if you are a city that's on the line, or if you're someone in the state, really promote this resource. My team, the intergovernmental team, works very closely with the State Communities and Energy Programs Office to really ensure that we're getting the word out from, you know, the state energy office level to the local government, to commissioners, to PUCs, to really ensure that you have all the information you need. So please utilize that resource. And just to highlight other TA and assistance, although, you know, DOE cannot provide applicants assistance in filling out applications, there are some other resources and partnerships that are occurring across the federal government. So one of the great things about being here at DOE is seeing how we work internally with our sister departments and agencies. And so EPA's got a thriving community technical assistance centers. And you know, we love our acronyms in federal government. So TIC-TACs are, I think they've announced them already, but they're going to be regionally based, and they're going to be amazing resources for our cities and our states and folks in the community. They're going to be able to help folks, and what I've heard, the challenges behind actually applying to funding opportunities. So you can learn more about these. I'm happy to connect folks with my colleagues at EPA if they like, but it's something that, although we at DOE can't provide that assistance is being provided in one of our sister agencies. So please take advantage of that. Next slide. All right. And I'd like to just highlight again how you can stay connected. I always tell folks, I know DOE is a behemoth. It is a large agency with a lot of great information and a great work being done, but it's hard to navigate. So I always advise that if you can, please sign up for updates. I know on our bill funding webpage, there is a email listserv you can sign up for. You'll get the latest about bill funding opportunities. There's also newsletters for specific program offices if you'd like to sign up for those. And our team has been working really hard to make the webpage and our website as user-friendly as possible. But we're always here as a resource. And on the next slide, Yusuf has listed our contact information. As your North Carolina designated DOE contact, I'm happy to have conversations with you all in the future. I know Yusuf is as well, and we are just excited to continuing to move the work forward so we can best serve the North Carolina community. And with that, I'll pass it back over to Kimberly.
Excellent job. Thank you both so much for that informative presentation. I would just like to highlight again that Congresswoman Deborah Ross worked very hard, and she was pleased that Congress was able to pass, as you've heard, both the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. These were significant achievements, and we just wanted to highlight that she was very thrilled to be a part of both of those and really made a lot of these incentives possible. Now, we would like to hear from you. We did receive a few questions in advance that I will kick off with, but please raise your hand using the notation on your Zoom screen, and we will call on you. First question, will there be any advantage to partnering with adjacent municipalities to realize these incentives?
I think the short answer there is yes. I mentioned the community benefits plan and how the department is looking at deploying a lot of these investments in a holistic manner that really has community buy-in, and that means partnering with other municipalities that are adjacent, as well as several organizations within those communities. And so if there are specific programs that you have in mind, please feel free to reach out. But I think the short answer there is yes.
Okay, and second question, and then we're going to open it up. What funding is available to nonprofits in the clean tech ecosystem? Do nonprofits need to partner with industry to seek funding?
Yeah, I'll just say there are opportunities for nonprofits to take advantage of funding. I'm happy to send those specifically for folks, but yeah, there are some opportunities available. So if that individual is interested, please, Kimberly, give them my contact information and I can send the list that's available.
All right, we'll do.
And this is Janie. I'll just tag in with another thing to note for nonprofits. The Inflation Reduction Act also is packed full of tax credits, which for the most part DOE is not administering, but we are providing a supporting role to the Treasury Department. And what's fun about those this time around is many of them are refundable. So people who don't have a tax appetite, like a nonprofit or a city or a state, can get those incentives now, where previously things like the 48C tax credit and other sort of existing tax credits that were expanded or enhanced by the Inflation Reduction Act, they didn't used to be available to such a wide universe of folks. So definitely, if you've not ever entertained tax before, this might be your moment.
Okay, so I'm going to call on Shannon Baxter. You can unmute yourself, I believe, and ask your question.
Thanks so much, Kimberly. So when I am thinking about the rebates at the point of sale for appliances, is there going to be some way of monitoring to guarantee that appliance prices aren't being raised so that the rebates actually aren't benefiting the customers any? And I have one more after that. Is there a way to involve our COGS in this process? Our Council of Governments? So in any of the process?
Sure. On your first question, I think certainly that's a concern that DOE is looking at and working through with states. I think this is sort of an interesting program design phase, and I think that's why we're not going to see much movement on the program until later this year or early next year, because we want to make sure that we work through those complexities on the front end, so we're not posed with those issues on the back end. And so I think that's certainly something that we're looking at and trying to address through program design. Torrin, I don't know if you have anything else to add on that or on the Council of Governments piece either.
Yeah, and thank you for your question. I agree with what you just said on to your first question, and with the COGS, I know that I've met with at least one COG. I think they were in North Carolina. They met with our EECBG team. And so I always advise folks to be engaged and involved in the conversation as far as like their participation specifically with with the issue that you presented. I'm not really sure about that, but I do advise those councils of governments to be as actively engaged as I would, in the process when we're, hashing out a new program or thinking about what the structure is going to be, to really have their voice and their concerns addressed and raised. It's important, and that helps us when we're thinking about structure to really take that into consideration and provide the best program we possibly can for folks.
Are there any additional questions from the audience before I go on to some of the pre-submitted ones? Anyone else? Okay, I'll tee up another one of these. Are there any plans to negotiate down the number of IRA incentives that could be removed under HR 1?
I can jump in on that one. This Congress has been incredibly difficult over the past couple of years. And, as Kimberly mentioned before, it was really hard work to get the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law across the finish line and signed into law. And, also mentioned we were really happy about that. And as we turn our attention this Congress to the implementation phase, this webinar is only one of, a lot of things that we want to do. We want to make sure that these incentives get into the right hands in Wake County and in North Carolina. And, as attempts are made to, reduce the impact of these bills and cut some of these programs, I can assure you that Congresswoman Ross is going to do everything that she can to make sure that that does not happen.
Okay, did anyone else have a question? All right, I will share one more here from the pre-submitted ones. How can universities, i.e. the UNC system, take advantage of the IRA solar incentives?
I'm sorry, Kimberly, can you repeat that question?
Sure. How can universities in the UNC system take advantage of the IRA solar incentives?
Well, I know with the incentives, and I would say, and Yusuf, correct me if I'm wrong, these are still things that are being flushed out. So I'm happy to follow up with more specifics. That's the thing, unfortunately. These incentives are great resources and great opportunities, but would need to just follow up. So like the nonprofits, please feel free to email me and I can get you specific information on that.
And I'll chime in. I know one of the pathways that could be available to UNC would be the 48C tax credits for clean energy deployments. And that's one of the very few, I think there's just 2 or 3 programs that are tax credits that DOE is actually administering and not Treasury. And the only reason why that is because 48C and one of the others have sort of a cap, the credit is available up until this amount of money or this amount of megawatts deployed. I can't remember which the metric is, but when there's sort of a maximum, then you have to run the program more like a competition, and DOE does competitions and Treasury doesn't so much. But 48C is one to look out for, and we are still working right now to put together how that program will be run. And I think you can expect sort of some new news about that within just the next few weeks. So the 48C tax credit, let me see if I can tell you. Oh, its formal name is the Extension of the Advanced Energy Project Credit. Others might know it as the investment tax credit, and it's in section 13501 of the Inflation Reduction Act. So keep an eye on that one.
And to Janie's point, that is probably something that will be highly publicized. So happy to send whatever information comes out around that. And one of the things is, as I hear from stakeholders, it's challenging to keep tabs on everything that's coming out of DOE. So in our position as regional specialists, we're really trying to decrease that angst and the challenges that come with that. So happy to follow up with that individual, those resources.
Okay, anyone have a direct question? I just want to acknowledge that several of you are emailing, which is great. Torrin and Youssef directly in real time, and they're responding to you. How they're doing that while they're talking, they're fabulous. But they are responding in real time back. So please feel free to do that. If you did not get a chance to ask your question or you're still formulating it, please email them directly. We will have their contact information. We're also, as we remind you, we'll have this recording available on our YouTube. I just want to thank our panelists. You all provided so much amazing information. Again, thank you, Torrin, Youssef, Janie for chiming in. Thank you so much. Houston from our team, we really appreciate you all taking the time to give us a really deep dive here. And thank you all, the participants, for joining us for this webinar. If there's anything that the Office of Congresswoman Deborah Ross can do and the Department of Energy, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We are available for your help. And we will send the email with the YouTube link later on, as well as, again, we're going to have the Department of Energy contact information in that link. So please keep an eye out for that. With that, we are going to let you have 6 more minutes of your morning back. And thank you all again so much for joining us. And we'll be in touch soon.
Kimberly, I'll add one quick thing.
Okay.
As folks or especially submitting applications or concept papers, please let our office know. We would love to be helpful and provide letters that you can include with your application. So please keep us posted. We really are committed to doing what we can to make sure that these incentives, come into Wake County, come into North Carolina. So please keep us posted on your efforts. And thank you all so much. And a huge thank you to DOE.
Thank you for having us, and thank you to Congresswoman Ross and staff, Houston, Kimberly, Mora, the whole team, for your leadership in getting both of these bills across the finish line in Congress and giving us the opportunity to deploy these really critical resources.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. We hope to hear back.